So, hello everyone, and a very good evening or a good morning, depends on the time zone that you're joining us from. My name is Krishna, and with me we have Pratyush, who is going to help you understand and take you on the journey of what is Unified Compliance Framework and how do we empower Indian fintechs with one framework that can solve all their compliance issues. Okay, I think we are good to start then. So we'll start with a small introduction about Tsaaro as well as Scrut and what each of these organizations do. We will tend to also focus more on the services that we offer as a company. So a little bit about Tsaaro. We are a data protection consulting firm, primarily a made in India service company, focusing more on the security and privacy services and helping a lot of Indian organizations improve their data protection posture. A little bit about me as well, but that's probably on the next slide. So I'll just pass it over to you, Pratyush, if you can help our audiences understand a little bit about Scrut.
Yeah, absolutely. Hi everyone. I am from Scrut Automation, and we essentially provide a tool for risk observability and compliance automation. We have been around for over 2 years now. We serve close to 500 mid-market and enterprise customers around the world. And we these enterprises are essentially cloud native companies. And we help them stay compliant 24/7 and give them a single window dashboard of their audit readiness through an easy to use GRC platform.
Perfect, Pratyush. Thank you so much for that introduction as well. So, folks, Scrut and Tsaaro, we are also partners, right? We are helping a lot of Indian organizations automate their compliance requirements, and that's where we also take assistance from Scrut in terms of making sure the product to build this compliance automation is there, and at the same time, the risk observability or the risk quantification that a lot of organizations are talking about these days can be achieved as well. Also a bit about us as well, right, Pratyush, because we're, of course, giving our views here. So my name is Krishna. I'm a co-founder here at Tsaaro. I look after privacy, security, compliance projects. At the same time, I also ensure that a lot of business processes as a startup is something that we can also build upon. So certain internal operations that I help Tsaaro achieve. And at the same time, I'm also the lead for a bunch of different projects based out of India, Gulf, and the US as well. So Pratyush, I'll just pass it over to you for a quick introduction, and then we can move forward.
Right. So I'm not a founder, but nonetheless, I am leading growth for Scrut in the APAC region. India being obviously one of the largest fintech ecosystems around the world. So that's what I do. I come with over 12 years of experience, with a large part of it being in the enterprise SaaS space.
Perfect. Thank you, Pratyush. Thank you for that. So, Pratyush, what is it about India that you also see? India is, of course, going through a digital transformation phase. A lot of new technologies. The engineers that are creating those technologies are mostly from India. Similarly, for Scrut as well, it's a made in India product, right? It's something that's developed in India. So, how do you see the future for Scrut personally? I mean, what do you think are the motivations behind Scrut? And what are the challenges that Scrut is trying to help startups, mid-size, as well as enterprise level organizations to achieve? Just your personal opinion on that, Pratyush.
Correct. No, that's a great question, and I think we, especially folks of our generation, where going outside of India, building a career outside is something that is still sort of quite possible for all of us. A lot of us chose to stay back, right? And the only reason for that is because India is at a very special moment in history where there's this massive demographic dividend, digital transformation, large like public digital goods that are being made at an unprecedented scale. There's Aadhaar, there's UPI, there's a penetration of internet that's happening. So on top of it, what's really happening is that there is a large amount of fintech services being distributed digitally, and that is also happening at a pace where the user experience is getting easier, better, convenient at the same time, right? So this is something, and then the scale at which this is happening is unprecedented, not seen anywhere. I think China was the only place where it happened, but that was a very different ecosystem than what India offers. So because all of that is happening and at such a fast pace, the regulators are playing a very, very important role in ensuring that while there is convenience that is being offered to the customers, it is also secure. right? There is no there are enough guardrails and clarity given to everyone in terms of ensuring that there is data privacy and security.
No, I hope the kindness stays of course, for the foreseeable future as well, Pratyush. And I mean, looking at how India has changed, I mean, I'm a huge fan of UPI personally. I mean, it has changed the way we deal with money. I don't even remember personally the last time I carried some cash. Despite a lot of people telling me that you should definitely keep some, I've never felt the need to actually keep cash anymore. So over the last 2 years, I barely remember keeping any cash in my wallet because everyone takes UPI these days, right? Similarly, if you look at the fast delivery systems such as maybe Blinkit or Zepto, right? So I was just talking to my friends yesterday and we just identified or discovered that we don't have a speaker at the house. Then we just opened up Blinkit and I saw that a speaker can be delivered to me in 12 minutes. Right? In
Right.
no country in the world, this kind of transformation is happening or this kind of services are there, which also begs the question that should we also focus a lot on building India rather than, also helping other nations develop, because India has that capability, that potential to really go forward.
Absolutely,
Perfect.
absolutely.
I'll also jump quickly onto the agenda for today's webinar. So we will start with a simple introduction of what is a unified compliance framework, what are some key principles that we can attach to the framework, what are some benefits out of it. We will also talk a bit about challenges faced by Indian FinTech, one of which is a lot of regulations, right? Then we'll also talk about what is Scrut automation about, and Pratyush has already given us an overview or a very high level insight into what Scrut does. We will delve a little bit deep into what exactly Scrut would do and how exactly would it integrate with your existing ecosystem. Then we'll also focus a lot about how Scrut can solve those issues that you're identifying and what does the platform look like, right? So we'll talk about these things. And looking at the introduction, UCF is a single framework which is used for compliance, which could be used for protection. It can also be used to internally making sure your processes are aligned to your internal business processes, right? So the primary keywords that we usually attach to a unified compliance framework are compliance, security, data privacy, risk, and business continuity, right? Pratyush, what is your take on the Indian fintech ecosystem and how it has developed over the last 2 years? Because a lot of organizations came up, a lot of them have also secured funding. So what is your vision? What do you think is the vision for Indian fintech ecosystem as well?
Right. I think over the last, like you said, 2, 3 years, there has been a massive influx of not just capital, but also a lot of players coming up offering, these amazing products and services digitally. I feel that we are at a stage where we are seeing maturing of the entire ecosystem. The last 2 years were about figuring out the market size and figuring out what the product market fit or the business fit is going to be like, and now it's a lot about maturing the entire ecosystem. So you're not just seeing that on the capital side, where things like profitability and stickiness and core unit economics is coming in. On the regulator side, you see a lot of clarity coming around regulations, what is allowed, what is not allowed, what should be charged for, what should not be charged for, what is a regulated entity, what does not need to be a regulated entity, right? So those are, I think, the entire ecosystem across the board, from investors to business owners and founders to the consumer. Everyone is maturing, and that is just going to continue over the next couple of years. And I think it's good for everyone in the ecosystem.
Definitely, Pratyush. I think I completely agree with that as well. When you look at maturity from a perspective that any organization that is building a product mostly focuses on the business and the product, and compliance is usually seen as an afterthought unless it becomes a roadblock in expanding your business.
Correct.
Right. So I'll also put some thought into a unified compliance framework as well, and how do we exactly create it, right? So whenever you want to create any framework, you understand the objective of that framework. Are you trying to comply your organization to an industry standard, such as maybe ISO 27001, or maybe you're looking for SOC 2 attestations, right? So you have to identify your goal first. If you're in the fintech business, you will have to understand that these certifications or standards are, of course, there, but there are also certain regulatory, security, and privacy requirements that you will have to fulfill. Now, the first step that you do is Of course, you chose your base framework. Let's call it ISO 27001. You chose it as your base framework. Now you're looking at the additional requirements that are coming in from the regulations. So in the fintech industries, it could come from RBI, it could come from SEBI, it could come from IRDAI, which are regulatory bodies owning their own personal or owning their respective industry. And these regulatory bodies are coming up with requirements which are evolving every day. And at the same time, if you're a fintech, there are also certain requirements, right, which you have to mandatorily
Correct.
fulfill.
Correct. Just one thing I want to add here, right? So regulator is one thing, but increasingly what we are seeing is that because in Indian fintech ecosystem, a lot of these early stage companies, they have to collaborate with banks or other regulated entities. Banks also conduct a lot of custom audits on these tech partnerships, and that also keeps on changing, that also keeps on evolving. And banks generally conduct these audits that are far more complex and elaborate than just a RBI or a SEBI circular or regulation. So UCF becomes very handy in those cases as well.
Definitely. I also remember a conversation that I had with a smaller fintech startup that was just growing in, and they came to us and they said that Krishna, I need your help in getting PCI DSS certified. Right. So then I just started with my set of questions and I asked, do you actually even process any payment related information? They said, no, we don't process anything, but the bank has it as a mandatory requirement for us to comply to it. Right. So these things are also happening because banks understand that obviously they have to go through PCI DSS because they process a lot of payment related information, but not every tech association they have, or not every tech product they use also processes the same information. Right. So in those cases, I think it also becomes increasingly important for a fintech organization to understand whether it is applicable to them or not. Right. So Pratyush, I would also just pass it over to you if you would want to talk about harmonization, commonality, and scalability as the key principles that help us create the UCF.
Correct. So, like we were just discussing a couple of minutes back, the number of frameworks that an average fintech organization in India has to comply with, the number of audits that they have to go through in 1 year, right? This, not just the scheduled audits, but also the surprise audits. The scale and the complexity of those is so high and so massive that there is a dedicated team whose full-time job is just to ensure that everything is in place, right? The evidences, the policy, the artifacts, everything is secured in one place and properly indexed on a Google sheet and so on. And because everything changes so rapidly in terms of new circulars, new updates, and so on, it's always a race that you're running on a treadmill. No matter how fast you run, you're always lagging behind. So the first pillar that we built the UCF upon was harmonization, which means that across multiple regulations, multiple standards, and multiple frameworks, how you can harmonize them into one single framework, so that at least the like psychologically and perception wise, it is one simple framework that you are looking at and conforming to, and not so many frameworks that continuously sort of evolve. The kind of evidences and artifacts that you need to collect for a simple access control will also be common across a lot of these. So, so imagine if you have to collect that evidence 15 times for 15 regulations or 15 frameworks versus you have to collect it once for the UCF, and then the UCF tags it across multiple frameworks, right? Straight away, your effort is reduced by 1 by 15. So, that is the other sort of principle on which the UCF is built to essentially help you reduce the duplicity of effort, which is there across multiple frameworks. And then the last pillar is scalability. What this really means is that today, if I'm a fintech organization selling, I'm into, let's say, broking. Tomorrow, I want to offer direct mutual funds, or I want to open a prepaid instrument, or I want to enter a new market. Because I'm setting up a new product, there is, there's a complete set of different regulations that I'll have to, adhere to. But if I have a UCF in place, it helps me scale my business into a new market, into a new product, into a new geography very easily. The effort is just incremental and not, transformational, that I have to set up an entire team that will look at this new framework or a new standard. So these three principles are, built keeping in mind the teams that have to really deal with this on a day-to-day basis. And UCF obviously tries to make their, day-to-day lives easier and make them look good in front of their bosses.
Yeah, I completely agree with that, Pratyush. I think a key metric that I also help communicate to my clients is that it reduces the time. I mean, initially you would feel that it's a lot of effort, that you have to create one framework and you have to do those repetitive artifact collection or evidence collection, even when the audit is not there. But at the same time, if you look at the longer picture, or if you look at the journey that you will have to take to make sure that the audit process is streamlined, the amount of time it will take for you as an organization to spend during this audits will greatly reduce. And especially if you have a platform that can also be a central repository of all these artifacts. Of course, SharePoints are always there. Everyone has a Google Drive or a OneDrive where they have those folder categorizations where they're trying to keep it as well. But at the same time, you would know that how difficult it becomes when you're trying to find something on one of those Google Drives. I have personally seen it during internal audits and external audits as well, that the client is very confident, or the organization is very confident that they have all the evidences in order. But when the auditor asks for it, it's something that they cannot find. Right. And then, of course, towards the end of the day, when there is a closing meeting for the audit, it comes out as a non-conformity. So, Pratyush, what kind of organization? I mean, let's say there's a fintech organization which is small, which does not have a lot of people, and it's just started off. But at the same time, they have a lot of requirements that they will have to comply to be market fit. Right. So, do you think a smaller organization should also go for a UCF, or is it something that's restricted to enterprises?
Right. Generally, what I always try to say is that compliance is a culture, and the sooner you adopt that culture, the better. The sooner you sow the seeds of that, the better. Because as you scale up, as more and more people join, as multiple offices open up, as your cloud infrastructure becomes complex, it becomes very difficult to then roll out or disseminate that sort of a culture at scale. And so sooner the better. And it essentially boils down to saying that you're laying a very strong foundation for growth, so that the entire culture that we talk about, right, shift left. But if you shift sooner onto that, and you set that foundation of a UCF, it just becomes so easy for you to then, like I said, the core principle of a UCF is scalability. And scalability not just comes at a very small scale, but that is the time at which you are moving very fast. You are trying to, release new products, you release new services, release new features. So the UCF scales with that, and it enables the scale. It does not become a hindrance in you scaling up at an early stage. So that was a long answer. Short answer is, it is meant as much for a late stage enterprise and as much for an early stage startup as well.
Right. Thank you for that, Pratyush. I absolutely agree with you on that, because a lot of times startups say that they don't have the relevant resources, or they don't have the relevant set of people who can get it done. So a challenge that you don't have the necessary set of people to get it done is probably not true anymore, because the internet is there. So information and knowledge is everywhere. Your product managers, they can definitely pick up the compliance requirements and put it as a part of the sprint and plan it really well. So as a leadership, or as someone who is sitting in the executive board, it is your responsibility to push it forward, to also help them understand it's mandatory, and it's of course for the benefit of your organization itself. So Pratyush, one of the challenges that I've personally seen by Indian fintechs is that they collect a lot of data, they store a lot of data, but they have no visibility into where the data actually is. Right. So this is a problem that a lot of Indian fintechs have been facing, and I think the UCF will definitely help solve this problem. But at the same time, in your conversations with different customers or clients, what are some challenges that they have told you about, that this is something that we're really struggling with, Pratyush, and how can you help us solve this, right? So how does it really happen with the conversations you have?
Right, correct. No, that's great. And, one of the lovely part of this conversation is that this is so jargon-like as a conversation that we are having, right? Otherwise, if you have a conversation with, CISO, and they are all sweet people, but there is a fair amount of jargon that gets thrown around, right? In terms of the tools that they use, in terms of the controls or the frameworks and so on. The point that you mentioned, and it's there on the screen as well, which is that the number of security tools and regulations that is increasing is at such an amazing pace that now there is a bit of fatigue that has come in, and it is also making it difficult to really look at okay, which information resides in which tool and how do I bring it together to really give me a very simple insight of my audit readiness or of my compliance at a certain point in time. Another challenge that we are seeing in the fintech ecosystem is that because the way the RBI or SEBI have set up some of the regulations for these entities, there is the legal entity structure that they have is fairly complex, right? There is a parent entity, then there are multiple child entities for different products or services. The dev team will sit in another entity and so on, right? So that also adds to the complexity of just making sure that okay, am I compliant or not? How many certificates do I need? Which certificate will apply to which body? The parent or the child body, and so on. So that's the other aspect. And then finally, because fintechs by nature have to grow very fast,
Right.
the speed at which a new cloud infrastructure can be set up is fairly decentralized, right? I mean, a new feature needs to be tested, so a new cloud environment will be brought up. You will go test in that, and some code will sit there, some code will sit somewhere else, and some data will sit somewhere else, and so on. So that is also it's quite esoteric in terms of how the cloud environment can grow complex over a period of time.
Right. I think the point about assets that you made, I would want to also throw in a jargon, which is very common in the industry, and a lot of products are coming in to solve that problem, which is basically shadow IT. Perfect. So, Pratyush, of course, this slide is completely on you, right? What is Scrut automation all about? You've helped us understand from a high level that Scrut, of course, helps us build risk observability as well as certain compliance initiatives that you want to solve with the help of Scrut. But as a because you're also the business head, right? So that you get asked this question a lot. What does Scrut do that other companies or other products do not do? Right. So I'll just pose this question from strictly a person who's just trying to understand the product. So on to you, Pratyush.
Correct. So in a very simple statement, what we essentially try to do is we try to partner with you to help you mature your baseline information security program, right? So that's what we do, and the tool that we have built that is really at the heart of it. So the value proposition that we bring applies to not just an early stage startup, but also a late stage, large company that might have raised like Series A, B, C, or even publicly listed, which is that you have a certain baseline of information security, and you need to mature it at let's say you conduct an audit which is every year, right? So every year, just before the audit or just after the audit, you are fairly confident in terms of your programs, your policies. They are very secure. They are up to date. You have all the artifacts. The entire team is aware of the security procedures and so on and so forth. But 6 months later, if I ask you the same question, if I conduct an audit today, what are the odds that you will succeed? What is your point in time audit readiness? So the first thing that we try to offer to business leaders and CXOs is providing them with visibility of the point in time audit readiness. And if they are lagging behind in certain areas, then what are the P0, P1 items or the lowest hanging fruits that you should really act upon or remediate so that your score in terms of audit readiness increases. And we try to do this specifically for the India stack, which means that the kind of regulations that they have to cater to, starting with PCI, the RBI, SAR norms, data localization, around PPI, SOC 2, and obviously ISO. So, just by counting these on our fingers, these are themselves 6 regulations or standards that we have counted. And if you are a fintech that is offering 2-3 services or products, then obviously that number gets multiplied or increases exponentially. So Scrut essentially helps you get that point-in-time audit readiness, not just across the standard frameworks, but also the custom frameworks that your banks or your other fintech partners will be trying to conduct on you. And how do you ensure that at any given point in time you are on top of these audits? So that is the problem that we solve, and that is the reason of our existence. And through a single window tool, we are able to handle all the information compliance standards and the internal SOPs. And the tool really has a strong foundation for all the three pillars or principles of the UCA that we spoke about, which is harmonization, removing the data duplicity, and scalability.
Right. So I think this is also something that you have spoken about briefly, Pratyush, about what Scrut has to offer and what is the value proposition for the product as well. Personally, as an organization, I think we've just started using Scrut as well. And we have also identified how efficient it is in terms of managing the audit or managing the compliance for our clients. And what we've also seen is that personally, I have worked with a lot of different modules, audit management modules, or GRC platforms or GRC automations, but there's a lot of manual effort still involved. Right, a lot of organizations actually say that they automate GRC, but the amount of manual effort I have to still put in is immense. But what I'm seeing is that the transformation that Scrut is bringing in is that the manual effort is actually reduced, right? And that's a really good news for me as a security or a privacy professional, because if you can reduce the manual processes and if you can automate more of the stuff, then you can do better work. Right, so you don't have to do manual work or effort. You don't have to put in those effort which can be solved by a script or solved by a tool. You can focus on smarter work around privacy, security, and also mature your processes faster. So that is where this comes in as a product or as a tool to integrate with your infrastructure and also help you have faster turnaround times, and obviously will probably get you that promotion in the future. Right, so those are some things that Scrut can help you with, and this is also some of the features that Scrut has to offer. So Pratyush, would you like to add anything to this? I'll just pass it over to you.
No, yeah, I think you gave a very sweet validation to us. Thanks a lot for that. And no further comments to add.
Perfect. So at the same time, I think I'll also pass it over to you, Pratyush, one last time about how Scrut solves the issues that organizations are facing these days around compliance. One is I'll also help you understand some issues that I've personally seen as a consulting firm's person who manages certain privacy compliance projects, and what CISOs and DPOs tell me that, Krishna, this is a problem I'm facing, solve it for me. Right. And one key problem that all CISOs, DPOs, or security leads have in common is an absence of security or data protection professionals. Right. A lot of organizations, enterprises are dependent on these professionals to improve their posture. But at the same time, these professionals do not exist, right? Because cybersecurity as a field or privacy as a field is still maturing, it's still growing. The number of people that are not there in the industry is immense, and the complexity of this field is huge as well. Right? And GRC, of course, is one segment of cybersecurity. If you look at the more technical aspects of it, such as penetration testing or malware analysis, the list is huge. Right, but Scrut helps you solve that particular issue where you may not need as many people to run your program. If you're a lean startup, if you are a company that wants to focus only on product and you do not want to get into the GRC space by hiring people in that space, Scrut can help you with that. Right, you can keep your team lean, and at the same time, you can also build your product or build a compliant product. Right, Pratyush, over to you as well.
Correct. No, what you said definitely is something that we are seeing on ground as well. But in terms of another benefit that we are able to add is the time to value for the product team, or for the team that is conducting the audits and so on. The time to actually get your job done, so that you are ready for the audit, ready for that report to be presented to the board and so on. That time to value is something that we try to keep reducing with every product release. And then these are some of the points that you see on the screen, help you sort of reduce that. We spoke about the elimination of duplicity of effort. The second point really talks about the fact that GRC as a category, GRC products have existed before and they'll continue to exist, right? But one single focus that we have put on us is that the product should be ready to be used out of the box, right? There should not be months and months of configuration or setup time on the product before you can even start using it or getting insight from it. So a lot of pre-mapped controls mapping has been done to save lots and lots of time for implementation. What we have seen is that in as soon as week or 10 days, an enterprise is able to see at least some level of readiness after using the third product. We also help the security teams monitor their control effectiveness through a single window. We spoke about multiple tools that are being used across different teams, across organizations. So if there a single window that you can look at and you can see what is the effectiveness of your control. So that is something that we provide. We integrate with over 70 odd popular tools that are being used by fintech organizations, and we pull in information across those 70 tools into a single window.
Perfect. Thank you, Pratyush, for that response as well. So we'll also just take a moment here and show you what it looks like in terms of a dashboard that you would see on Scrut as well. So Pratyush, I mean, you also mentioned a lot about dashboarding and how it exactly helps you understand the point in time audit readiness. Right, so you can see there are different numbers here on the screen which talks about different compliance standards and what are the status of different activities around it, the policies, the evidence tasks or the tests, and there are different collaborators who work together to make sure they can upload the evidences based on the tasks that are assigned to them. Right, so all those activities you can see on this unified dashboard, and especially with the advent of the UCF that Pratyush also spoken about. This unified dashboard will also help you understand the different status of your different type of audits that you have to go through. So this also brings us towards the end of our session today, Pratyush. And if there are any questions at all to all the participants out there, if you have any questions at all, you can reach out to us. Feel free to do it. We are more than happy to revert, and we are more polite in real life than on a webinar. So you can definitely reach out to us. Perfect. So with that, I think, Pratyush, we can also take our leave. And I thank you so much for helping us navigate through the UCF framework as well as helping us understand about Scrut. Thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, thanks a lot for having us. It was wonderful talking about UCF